When we talk about Australian property, it's usually all about houses and apartments, right? Well, today we're digging a little deeper. Literally, we're talking about the land itself, because believe it or not, a simple patch of dirt might just be one of the most valuable and resilient assets in the entire country right now. Let's get into it.
So, that brings us to the big question. Why is empty dirt suddenly Australia's new gold? It seems kind of strange, but the answer really gets to the very heart of our national housing conversation. To figure this out, we've got to look at a classic but intense clash between supply and demand.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. A recent report from Herron Todd in WA puts it perfectly. They say land supply is at the coalface of the housing crisis. This isn't just about rising prices anymore. It's about the very foundation of the housing market. The real bottleneck, the source of all this pressure? It's the simple lack of buildable land.
And that brings us to what we're calling the Great Land Squeeze. Think of it like a pressure cooker. It's this intense, nationwide battle, a real tug-of-war between a seemingly bottomless demand for land and a system that's just, well, struggling to keep up.
So let's break down this core conflict. On one side, you have this absolutely unrelenting demand. It just does not stop. And on the other side, a whole series of pretty severe blockers that are choking off the supply of new land before it can even get to the market. Let's look at each side a little closer.
First up, what's feeding the fire on the demand side? Well, for starters, Australia's population is growing at about 1.7% a year, and a lot of that is driven by migration. At the same time, the rental market is incredibly tight. It's so hard to find a place that it's basically channeling people away from renting and pushing them towards buying land to build their own home.
But just as demand is surging, the supply side is hitting a brick wall. Getting new developments approved is tangled up in these super complex planning processes. We're talking years of navigating red tape. And even when land does get the green light, the essential stuff, water, sewers, roads, is lagging way behind. On top of all that, developers are telling us they're facing delays of up to 6 months just to get the basic materials to build this stuff. And if you want one single number that just perfectly captures all this pressure, here it is, 1.2%. That is the national rental vacancy rate. When there are basically no homes left to rent, building your own stops being just a dream, and for many, it starts to feel like the only option left.
Okay, so you might be thinking, is this just a big city problem, a Sydney and Melbourne thing? Well, let's zoom out and take a look at the national picture to see just how widespread this land squeeze really is.
This here is the national property clock for houses, and honestly, it tells such a powerful story. Just look at it. Almost every single major market, from capital cities like Adelaide and Perth, all the way to regional hubs like the Gold Coast, Cairns, and even Broome, they're all in a rising phase. There's almost no downward pressure to be seen anywhere. And it is the exact same story for units. This is not some isolated trend in one or two cities. The data is showing us this is a broad, sustained upward pressure on property values right across the country. And it all stems from that same core tension, way too much demand for housing and just not enough land to build it on.
Now, it's important to remember that when we say vacant land, we're actually talking about two very different battlegrounds. It's really a tale of two types of land, greenfield versus infill.
So first, you have your greenfield estates. These are those brand new, sprawling developments on what used to be undeveloped land, usually way out on the fringes of our cities. This is where most of our new land supply is supposed to be coming from.
And to put a price on it, if you head out to a growth suburb like Clyde North in Melbourne's southeast, a typical block of just over 500 square meters is going to set you back around $500,000. For a lot of first-home buyers, that's the price of entry.
But then you have the second battleground, inner city infill. This is land inside existing suburbs, the blocks that pop up when an old house gets knocked down or a big property gets subdivided. These are like the unicorns of the land market, incredibly rare and fiercely fought over.
And the prices here? Well, they're in a totally different universe. In a suburb like Paddington in Brisbane, a block that's actually smaller than the one on the fringe recently sold for, get this, a staggering $2.35 million. That is almost 5 times the price. Just wow.
So as you can imagine, this intense competition in both of these markets is having a pretty dramatic effect on prices. Let's actually track just how fast this appreciation has been. We'll use a few examples from Western Australia where the market has been particularly red hot.
Okay, take a look at this block in Eglinton, up in Perth's outer coastal suburbs. In April 2024, it was bought for $240,000.
Less than a year later, it was sold again for $325,000. That is a 35% jump in under 12 months.
A little bit further up the coast in Yanchep, the story gets even crazier. A block sold for $212,500 in October 2023. Just over a year later, it was snapped up for $320,000. That's a 50% increase. 50! And check this one out. In the southern suburb of Treby, a block bought for $269,000 in September 2023 was sold for $425,000 less than 18 months later. That's a 58% increase. The speed of this appreciation is just absolutely incredible.
So, with demand through the roof, supply being choked, and prices just soaring, what on earth does the future hold? Well, the report gives us a pretty clear outlook on what to expect from a market that's now really defined by one word: scarcity.
And the key concept you really need to grasp here is something called the scarcity premium. It's pretty simple, really. It's the extra amount of money people are willing to pay for something just because it's hard to get. And right now, that premium is the single defining feature of Australia's vacant land market.
And looking ahead, the report suggests this situation isn't going to change anytime soon. These supply tensions are expected to continue, mostly because the deep systemic problems with planning and infrastructure, well, they're going to take years to fix. So what does that mean? It means prices are likely going to stay firm, and developers will keep competing like crazy for any scrap of land they can get their hands on.
And all of this leaves us with one final, and I think, pretty crucial question. For generations, the Australian dream was a home with a backyard. But as land itself transforms into this premium, scarce asset, you have to ask, is that classic dream now becoming a modern luxury, available only to a select few?